IV line was still taped to the back of my hand when I checked my phone. That's the part I keep coming back to. I was lying in a hospital bed less than 6 hours after giving birth to my daughter, and I was reading a text from my mother explaining why she couldn't make it. Not an apology exactly, more of a logistics update, like she was telling me a package had been delayed. We're still at the lake house. Your brother wanted to celebrate a little longer. You understand, sweetheart. You know how he gets. I set the phone face down on the mattress next to me. My husband Liam was asleep in the recliner in the corner of the room. He'd been awake for 31 hours straight. Our daughter, Ivy, we'd been calling her Ivy since the second trimester, was in the bassinet beside my bed, wrapped in a white hospital blanket with pink and blue stripes. She'd been breathing for 5 hours and 40 minutes. She had a tiny crease across the bridge of her nose that appeared when she frowned in her sleep. My parents had not seen any of it. They were 2 hours away at a lake house in the Adirondacks celebrating my brother's promotion. Let me back up. My brother Theo got promoted to regional director at his company the same week I went into labor. He's 31, he works in logistics management. It's a good job, a real accomplishment. I mean that sincerely. I'm not saying any of this to make him look bad. Theo worked hard for that promotion, and I was genuinely happy for him when he called me to share the news. Even though I was 38 weeks pregnant and could barely sit up straight without my lower back seizing. My parents were thrilled. My mother cried on the phone with him for 20 minutes. My father called all his college friends to tell them. Within 3 days, they had organized a long weekend at the Cullimans Lake House. Family friends with a property upstate, and had invited my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, practically everyone. A whole weekend of celebrating Theo. I want to be clear, I was invited too. My mother made a point of telling me that. Of course we want you there, sweetie, but we understand if the timing is tricky. The timing being that I was due in 8 days. I declined. Obviously, what I didn't expect was that everyone would still go, including my parents. Here's the thing about my family that took me about 28 years to fully understand. I was not the main character in it. I don't mean that in a bitter, self-fitting way. I mean it the way you eventually mean it when you finally process something, when you can say it out loud without your voice doing anything strange. I was the daughter who was fine. Theo was the one who needed managing, celebrating, supporting. From the time we were kids, the family energy organized itself around him, and I was just there, present, reliable, not requiring much. When I graduated college, my parents took me to dinner, just the 4 of us at an Applebee's near my campus because Theo had a travel soccer tournament that weekend they didn't want to miss. I ordered the pasta. My mother kept checking her phone for game updates. When I got my first real job, a marketing coordinator position at a mid-sized firm in Philadelphia, my father said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then pivoted to asking if I thought Theo should take a gap year before his MBA. When Liam proposed to me on a hiking trail in Vermont, I called my parents the same night. My mother said, "Oh, that's so sweet," and then asked if I'd talked to Theo recently because he'd seemed stressed. None of these things destroyed me. That's the part that's hard to explain. Each one was just a small, quiet thing. A slightly too short pause before the pivot. A distraction that arrived just as my news did. You don't even realize, for a long time, that the pattern is a pattern. Liam and I found out we were pregnant in January on a Thursday morning, and I sat on the bathroom floor for a while just holding the test. We hadn't been trying long. It felt enormous and terrifying and wonderful. I called my best friend Joanna first because she lives 3 time zones away, and I knew she'd scream with me without agenda. I called my mother that evening. She was happy, genuinely warmly happy. She asked about my due date, asked how I was feeling, asked if we told Liam's family yet. It was a good conversation, one of the best we'd had in years, honestly. My father got on the line toward the end and said, "Well, I guess we're going to be grandparents. About time." He laughed. I laughed. It was fine. Theo texted me a thumbs-up emoji the next day. I don't think he called. My pregnancy was not easy. I had hyperemesis in the first trimester. Real hyperemesis, the kind where you lose weight and end up on IV fluids twice and have to work from home because the smell of the office break room sends you to the bathroom floor. I told my mother this. She expressed concern. She also called me the following week to ask if I thought Theo should quit his job and look for something with more growth potential. At 23 weeks, I had a scare, some spotting, some cramping, a terrifying 3 hours in a labor and delivery triage room while they monitored the baby. Everything was okay, the baby was fine, I was fine. But I was shaking when I called my mother from the hospital parking garage, and I needed her to say the right thing. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, that sounds so scary. I'm so glad everything is okay. And then, listen, while I have you, I need your opinion on something about the lake house weekend." I said I had to go. I sat in my car for 15 minutes. Then I drove home. Liam's parents are different. They live in Ohio. They drove up to Philadelphia twice during my pregnancy just to check on us. His mother Beverly flew in for my baby shower and helped me address 60 envelopes by hand because I'd mentioned offhand that I hated the idea of printed labels. His father, Gene, showed up one Sunday in March with a toolbox and spent 4 hours assembling furniture in the nursery while Liam was out of town for work, and then stayed for dinner and never once made me feel like it was an imposition. I'm not saying this to embarrass my own parents. I'm saying it because I want you to understand that I have a reference point. I know what it looks like when family shows up. I know the shape of it. I'd seen it. It didn't come naturally from my own family, but I knew what it was. The lake house weekend was scheduled for the third weekend in September. My due date was September 14th. My mother called me the week before to go over the timeline. She was trying to figure out whether to leave on Thursday or Friday. She asked me how I was feeling. I told her I was tired and heavy and that the baby had been very active, which my midwife said could sometimes be a sign of early labor approaching. My mother said, "I'm sure you'll be fine for another week or two. First babies are almost always late." She was wrong. Ivy arrived the morning of September 12th at 6:47 a.m. after 14 hours of labor in a hospital in downtown Philadelphia. She weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had Liam's nose and my grandmother's ears, and she came out crying so loudly that the nurse laughed. Liam cried. I cried. Joanna cried from a FaceTime call propped against the water pitcher on my bedside table. I texted my parents from the delivery room at 7:02 a.m. "She's here. 7 pounds, 2 Oz. Everyone is healthy. We're so in love with her." My mother replied 22 minutes later, "Oh my goodness. We are so happy for you both." We're going to try to figure out the logistics. My father didn't reply until noon. His text said, "Great news, proud of you. Talk soon." They were already at the lake house. They had driven up the day before. By 2 in the afternoon, I had not heard a plan. Liam was managing visitors. His parents were driving in from Ohio and would arrive by evening. His sister had already been and gone, dropping off a meal train sign-up and a bouquet of yellow tulips. Joanna had sent an obscenely large gift basket via same-day delivery. My mother texted at 2:15, "We're working on it. Your uncle and aunt just arrived. It's a little complicated to just leave in the middle of things." I read that 3 times. Complicated to just leave? My daughter was 7 hours old. I didn't text back. I put the phone down. I held Ivy and I nursed her for the second time and I watched her little face work through the whole effort of it. The concentration, the scrunching and settling. Liam's mother, Beverly, arrived at 4:30 and sat in the chair beside me and held my hand and said absolutely nothing for a while. And that silence felt more like family than anything else I'd experienced that day. My parents arrived the following afternoon. Not the morning. Not within hours. The following afternoon, around 3 o'clock, almost 33 hours after Ivy was born. They walked in carrying a gift bag from a Hallmark store near the highway. The kind of bag with the tissue paper stuffed in the top. My mother hugged me carefully and said I looked tired. My father held Ivy for about 4 minutes and then said he needed to find the cafeteria. They stayed for 90 minutes. Before they left, my mother said, "We would have come sooner, but you know how it is with the family all together. It felt rude to just disappear." I said, "I understand." I did not say anything else. But I started doing math. Here's the math I did. When Theo bought his first condo 4 years ago, my parents gave him $40,000 toward the down payment. I know this because my mother mentioned it once casually. in the middle of a conversation about something else. The way she mentioned most things she didn't want to examine too carefully. When Liam and I bought our house the following year, I asked my parents if they might be able to contribute anything. My father said they'd love to help, but they were a little stretched. They gave us $3,000. I was grateful. I put it toward closing costs, and I said thank you, and I meant it. When Theo got engaged, my parents threw him and his fiancée a formal engagement party, rented a room at a restaurant, invited 40 people, had it catered. I saw the photos on Facebook. When Liam and I got engaged, my mother organized a dinner at their house. She made lasagna. It was a nice evening. When Theo's promotion weekend was planned, my parents rented a car and packed for 3 days and drove 2 hours to a lake house, while their daughter was 8 days from her due date. When their daughter gave birth, they needed 33 hours to make a 2-hour drive because it felt rude to leave early. I lay in that hospital bed and I added it all up and I looked at the number and I thought, this is not a coincidence, this is a choice. They've been making it for 30 years and I've been telling myself it was something else. We were discharged on September 13th, late afternoon. Liam drove us home. He carried the car seat inside and set it gently on the living room floor. And we both just looked at her for a minute. At Ivy in her tiny going-home outfit, eyes closed, completely unaware that she had just changed everything. That night, after she was fed and down and Liam was sleeping, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of decaf and I thought about what I wanted. Not what I was supposed to want. Not the version where I forgave everything immediately because family is family. Not the version where I made excuses or found reasonable explanations. What I actually wanted for my daughter and for myself. The answer came quietly, without drama. I did not want Ivy to watch me perform a closeness that didn't exist. I did not want her to grow up seeing me accept less than I deserved and call it love. I didn't want to teach her, through example, that the people who don't show up still get to stand in the front row. I want to stop here and ask you something, because I think about this all the time. Have you ever realized, not all at once but slowly, the way light changes in a room and you don't notice until suddenly you can see clearly? That you have been the one doing all the accommodating, all the adjusting, that you have been so focused on keeping things smooth that you never actually asked whether the arrangement was fair? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I find it helps to know who's in the room with me for this part. My parents called 2 days after we got home. My mother talked about the lake house weekend, how beautiful the weather had been, how great it was to see everyone, how Theo had given a little speech at dinner that made her cry. I listened. I said, that sounds really nice. And then I said, I need to tell you something and I want you to let me finish before you respond. I had written it down. Not to read verbatim, but because I knew myself. I knew I would get pulled off course if I didn't have the spine of it in front of me. I told them that I understood they had commitments that weekend. I told them I wasn't looking for an apology, because an apology without changed behavior doesn't do much for anyone. I told them that I had spent a long time treating the pattern between us like weather, like something that just happened. And I was done doing that. I told them that from this point forward, I would be making choices about our relationship based on actions, not intention. I told them I wouldn't be bringing Ivy to holiday gatherings, where she was one of many obligations. I told them they were welcome to visit us on our terms when they called ahead and confirmed. I told them I would not be making myself available for Theo's milestones until my own milestones receive comparable investment. Then I told them I love them because I do. That part is complicated and true at the same time. My mother said, I think you're being very unfair. My father said, you're blowing this out of proportion. I said, I'll talk to you both soon, and I ended the call. That was 8 months ago. My mother has called 7 times since. We've spoken 3 times. The conversations are careful and short. She has not said she understands. She has not said she was wrong. But the last time we talked, she asked me 3 questions in a row about Ivy. What she was eating, whether she'd started pulling herself up, what her laugh sounded like, and she didn't pivot to Theo once. It was a small thing, but I noticed it. I'm keeping track now. My father sent a card for Ivy's 6-month birthday. He signed it, Love, Grandpa and Grandma. There was a gift card for a baby store tucked inside. I texted him a photo of Ivy in response, just her face, just that serious look she gets when she's trying to figure something out. He texted back a heart. It's not nothing. Theo called me once, about 2 months after everything. He said, Mom says you're upset about something. I told him I wasn't upset. I told him I had made some adjustments to how I was managing my family relationships. And he didn't need to worry about it. He said okay, in a tone that made clear he had already stopped worrying about it. We talked about football for 4 minutes. We hung up. That was fine too. Liam's parents come every 6 weeks. Beverly babysits on Friday nights sometimes so Liam and I can go to dinner alone. Jean fixed our leaking kitchen faucet in November and refused to accept anything for it except a bowl of chili. Ivy knows their faces now. She lights up when Beverly walks through the door. This whole body brightness, her arms going up. That's what it's supposed to look like. I know that's what it's supposed to look like because I'm watching it happen. I'm not writing my parents off. I want to be careful to say that clearly because I think people sometimes hear these stories and expect a clean ending. The villain punished, the bridges burned, the credits rolling on an uncomplicated scene. That's not where I am. I'm somewhere more uncertain than that. More real than that. What I did was stop pretending. That's the whole thing, if I'm honest. I stopped pretending that what they offered was the same as what I needed, and I stopped contorting myself to make it fit. I stopped RSVPing yes to events where my presence was less important than my compliance. I stopped calling with good news and then waiting, braced for the pivot. And in the space that opened up, the space where the pretending used to live, something else started growing. Slowly. Quietly. I'm not sure what to call it yet, but it's mine. Ivy is 8 months old now. She has 4 teeth and a very strong opinion about pureed peas. She waves at strangers in grocery stores with this regal, deliberate hand motion that Liam says she got from his grandmother. I look at her sometimes, when she's playing on the floor, or when I get her up from a nap and she's warm and soft and still confused about the world. And I think about what she's going to learn about herself by watching me. About what she deserves. About whether the people who love her can be counted on to show up. I think about that a lot. And I think I'm going to make sure she knows the difference. I used to think patience was the same thing as wisdom. That if I just waited long enough, kept quiet long enough, absorbed enough without complaint, something would eventually shift. That the people I loved would notice the weight I was carrying and decide on their own to help me set it down. That's not wisdom. I know that now. That's just waiting. And waiting on its own doesn't change anything. It just gives you more time to watch the same patterns repeat. What I've learned, not from a book, not from a quote on a wall somewhere, but from living through the specific kind of hurt that comes from being the child who was always fine, is that the way people treat you is information. It's not a mystery. It's not a misunderstanding that one more conversation will fix. It's data, collected over years, and at some point you owe it to yourself to read it clearly. Theo didn't do anything wrong, not really. He was just the one my parents organized themselves around. He didn't ask for $40,000 toward his condo, while I took out a loan for mine. He didn't plan the lake house weekend. He didn't tell my parents it was okay to stay while I was in labor 2 hours away. He just existed in the center of the family, the way he always had, and they moved toward him the way water moves downhill. Automatically, without deciding to. That's the thing about favoritism that people don't talk about enough. It's not usually malicious. It doesn't require a villain twirling a mustache. It's just a long series of small frictions that always seem to bend in one direction. And if you're the one on the wrong end of the bend, you can spend decades explaining it away. They're just more worried about him. He needs more support. I'm the strong one. They know I'll be okay. Until you're lying in a hospital bed with an IV in your hand and a 7-hour-old baby in a bassinet beside you and a text on your phone that says, leaving felt complicated. I made a choice that day. Not a dramatic one. Not a performance. Just a quiet, clear-eyed decision to stop filling in the gaps for people who had never once filled them for me. I didn't scream. I didn't send a long email at midnight. I waited until I was home and steady, and then I said what was true. Plainly. Without asking for anything back. That's what I mean when I talk about integrity, the real kind, the kind that costs you something. It's not about being right. It's about being honest about what you need and then building your life accordingly. Even when the building is slow. Even when it means dismantling something you thought was permanent. Beverly shows up. Jean shows up. Liam shows up. Ivy is 8 months old and she already knows which faces mean safety. She learned that without anyone teaching her. She learned it because it's consistent. Because the people who love her prove it in the same small ways, over and over, without being asked. I want to be that for her too. Not the parent who means well from a distance. The one who is actually there, in the room, on time, present, when it counts. That's the only inheritance worth leaving.